Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
Laura meets with Jack in his office, where he informs her that Anna called him and she's been called back by the WSB on a classified assignment. Laura doesn't believe Anna would walk out on her job without calling her, but Jack says that's all he knows, and can offer the WSB's backing in Anna's absence if demanded. Laura takes off, but not before advising Jack not to use her granddaughter as a commodity to trade for information with Valentine or anyone else. Emma tries to play nice. Emma meets with Charlotte at Bobby's to bandy the plan to get the crucial fob to Dalton's lab, which Britt has. In the background, Britt orders a coffee to go at the counter, and Emma swoops in to pay for it as a peace immolation. Britt accepts her offer, and Emma suggests they snare a seat. Emma apologizes for what she said in Dalton's office, and she's looking forward to working with her and the professor. Britt tells her they not only wouldn't be working together, but she's not getting near that lab, as it's authorized labor force only. Britt takes off. What news does Lulu have for Charlotte? Lulu arrives, having set up Charlotte's laptop, which was under some of Tracy's boxes. She also brings her son news of her father, and that Jack may be bringing him then to the States. Charlotte knows this is so Jack can get further information out of her pater. And Lulu admits that this could put her in a dangerous position. Charlotte assures her mama that her pater would no way let her visit if it was dangerous, and she's precious to the WSB, so they'll cover her. Lulu says there could come a day when Valentine's value to the WSB is no more, so what happens to her also is what has her upset. Laura latterly arrives at Bobby's, spots Emma, and asks if she's heard from her grandma lately. Emma says she got a voicemail from her that she went out of city, and it has to do with the WSB. Laura also heads over and gives Charlotte a clinch, as she hasn't seen her in periods. Charlotte heads to talk with Emma, and Laura sits down with Lulu. Lulu fills her mama in about her and Charlotte's discussion about Valentine. Laura says she's on the same runner with her son, that Jack is dangerous. He proved that moment when he told her about Anna evaporating out of nowhere. However, he'll use this against her in the crusade, if Ezra learns of this. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Emma converse, and Emma still hasn't got the crucial fob, and their takedown has to be tonight. Lucas says yes. At Ava's, Lucas answers the door to Marco, who incontinently asks him to move in together. Joss pops her head out and says hello, and that she was just heading out and leaves the men to talk. Lucas tells Marco his timing is on point, as Ava just told him it was time for him to go. Still, Lucas ain't moved by with him, as it feels too fast and too analogous to what happened with Brad. Marco insists he's not Brad. He knows Lucas is spooked, he is, too, but he loves him and doesn't anticipate Lucas to say it back. He just wants to be around him all the time, as Lucas makes him happy. Lucas admits Marco makes him happy, too, and agrees to give this a shot. What angers Jack? Joss heads to Jack's office and tells him that Marco showed up when she was talking to her uncle, and asked Lucas to move by. She's upset that this could put her uncle in peril, and she needs to advise him ever without mentioning Sidwell. Jack is mealy and informs her that if she tells Lucas, he'll have her arrested for disloyalty. He orders her to stay close to Lucas, as her uncle has just come their most precious asset. What does Jason suggest to Sonny? At Sonny's, Jason informs him that he has inked a deal for backup peers in Rochester should the election not go their way. He notes there's a more straightforward result, and that's to get relief of Sidwell. Sonny says Turner has been keeping an eye on him and Sidwell, and if they make a move right now, they hand Turner what she needs to take them down. Sonny also knows the WSB is watching Sidwell, which would complicate effects for them on a civil position. Sonny says there's another issue. Lucas is dating Marco, and Lucas is a wild card who wouldn't vacillate to go to the police if he suspects foul play on their end. It'll also bring Alexis and Christina down on them because of their connection to Marco, so taking out Sidwell isn't worth alienating those he cares about. What brings Ava to Windmere? At Windmere, Ava is going over art pieces with him for the castle, and Sidwell asks her about Sonny. She wishes to avoid that subject as she'd like to keep the peace between her and Avery's father. Sidwell wants peace with him, too, and asks how to achieve it. Ava says as long as Sonny sees him as a trouble to his children, there will be no peace and no place to hide. They've tea and chat about Sonny some further, including Marco's exposure, which Ava knows Sonny was suspected of. He comments on how perceptive she's and that she's hello to drop by at any time, as she brightens up this place. Ava has to go, so Sidwell sees her out. Britt appears out of nowhere, saying, "Thank God, I allowed. She'd no way leave." He asks how she got in then, and she explains she used to live then. He scolds her, saying it was careless of her to come unasked, and asks for an update. Britt says Dalton is serious about cutting him out, so Sidwell orders her to keep on him. Outside, Marco and Lucas arrive and partake a kiss. They walk in, and Lucas is stupefied to see Britt there. Who is that strange man? At the sanitarium, Felicia is on the phone with Brooke Lynn about James' writing assignment, when a shady character, played by Peter Stormare, arrives as Felicia gabs on the phone. He puts earphones in and rolls his eyes as she doesn't stop talking, and it's clear he's watching her for some reason. This has to be either Faison or Peter, in a mask, right? Ultimately, when Felicia begins working on a computer, he walks by and hands her a brochure labeled General Hospital. She thanks him, and when a pencil rolls off the office, he catches it and hands it to her, saying, "There you go." He walks off, and she seems suspicious, as if she noticed commodity in his voice. She yells at him to stop and asks, "What's this?" When she looks at the train, we know we get back to who he is. Across the ocean. In Steinmauer, Carly, in her super spy disguise, meets with Valentine. She relays that Jack is working to transfer Valentine to a captivity in the States, which only proves to Valentine that Carly is Jack's eyeless spot, as he followed her suggestion. Valentine warns her that Jack is an exceptional agent, and she has to be indefectible and not make a single mistake. However, he'll show her no mercy and will go after Joss to hurt her, if Jack sees through her dishonesty. In the show's final moments. At Bobby's, Laura tells Lulu she has to be at her stylish at the final debate tonight and move Port Charles, that Ezra is bad for the megacity. Emma tells Charlotte PCU will be packed for the debate tonight, so it's the perfect time to strike as nothing will be watching the lab. Charlotte tells Emma to leave getting the crucial fob to her. In Steinmauer, Valentine tells Carly to validate everything she hears Jack say on the phone and give the word to him, as he'll know what he needs when he sees it. Jack thinks he's insurmountable, but he has too since his pride in her. Together, they can bring him to his knees. In his office, Jack tells Joss they've no way been this close to figuring out Sidwell's plans, so she has to move Lucas to move in with Marco. Jack also calls Vaughn to increase observation on Lucas Jones and his swain. At Windmere, Sidwell tells Lucas and Marco that he was meeting with Dr. Westbourne about a position as the Menage croaker. But it turns out she doesn't have her license. He sees Britt out and also welcomes Lucas to Windmere. Britt listens at the window and learns Lucas is moving in. Eventually, Sonny tells Jason they should be prepared to take Sidwell out, but only as a last resort. When the time comes, Jason says he'll be ready. The air in the Quartermain mansion was never truly still. It was thick with the dust of old money and the ghosts of generations of secrets, all held in a fragile equilibrium by the iron will of its matriarch, Monica Quartermain. Her passing, while not unexpected given her age and health, had nonetheless sent a seismic shock through the foundations of Port Charles high society. For her family, it was a personal cataclysm. For the city's power players, it was the starting pistol for the redistribution of one of its greatest fortunes. The reading of the will was to be a formality, a somber gathering where the vast Quartermain empire, stakes in ELQ, real estate holdings, art collections, and liquid assets that could fund a small nation, would be parsed out according to the last wishes of its queen. The family assembled in the grand drawing room, a collection of familiar faces wearing masks of grief and poorly concealed avarice. There was TRACY Quartermain, Monica's formidable and often overlooked sister, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Ned Quartermain, the steady, sometimes exasperated son. Brooke Lynn, his ambitious daughter. Dylan, TRACY's son, present more out of duty than expectation. And then the others woven into the family tapestry through love, conflict, and necessity, Michael Corinthos, Drew Kane, and a smattering of lawyers and executors. The initial reading was conducted by the family's longtime attorney, Francis Pendergast. It was, as expected, thorough and largely predictable. Bequests to charities, trusts for grandchildren, the secure future of the mansion itself. The bulk of the ELQ shares and the controlling interest, however, were the prize everyone was waiting for. Pendergast adjusted his glasses, his voice a dry, legalistic monotone. And to my son, Alan Quartermain, though predeceased, his line shall be recognized through his son, Jason Morgan, and his adopted son, Drew Kane, who shall each receive a 5% stake in ELQ Industries. A murmur went around the room. Jason's inclusion was a surprise, given his long-standing estrangement from the family business. To my grandson, Michael Corinthos, a 5% stake, in recognition of his blood and his recent service to the company. Michael gave a tight, grateful nod. And to my beloved sister, Tracy, I leave the entirety of my personal art collection, including the Remington and the cassette, knowing she alone has the taste to appreciate them. Tracy's lips pressed into a thin line. The art was valuable, yes, but it was a bauble. A consolation prize. She could feel it. She was being sidelined, once again, in favor of the male line, the golden children. The angry threats were already boiling behind her ribs, a silent promise of the legal war to come. Pendergast continued, reaching the crescendo. Finally, the remainder of my estate, including my controlling 42% stake in ELQ Industries, along with the title to the Quartermain Manor and all its associated holdings, I bequeath in its entirety to. He paused, the dramatic tension unbearable. Every eye was locked on him. My one true and rightful heir, my daughter. The room froze. Daughter? Monica had no daughter. She had Alan. She had Jason. A wave of confused whispers broke out. There must be some mistake, Ned stated, his voice cutting through the noise. Monica didn't have a daughter. Pendergast remained impassive. The will is quite specific. He read on, to my daughter, whom I was forced to relinquish in my youth, a decision that has haunted me every day of my life. I have spent decades searching, and in the last years of my life, I was blessed with the knowledge of her existence and her identity. My estate is to be held in trust until she can be located and a DNA test confirms her paternity. Until that time, the estate's executor shall be. He looked up, his gaze landing on the most stunned face in the room. My sister, TRACY Quartermain, who I charge with the sacred duty of finding her niece and ensuring she takes her rightful place as the heart of this family. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sharp intake of Tracy's breath. She had not been sidelined. She had been anointed. And in that single, shocking proclamation, the baptism of a new, tumultuous era for the Quartermains had begun. Act I, the Huntress and the Ghost. The fallout was immediate and chaotic. The family splintered into factions. Michael and Drew were pragmatic but concerned. A new, unknown heir with a controlling interest could destabilize ELQ entirely. Brooke Lynn saw a rival for influence she had hoped to wield. Others dismissed it as the rambling of an old woman, a ghost story that would ultimately see the assets redistributed among the known players. But Tracy Quartermain, for perhaps the first time in her life, was not motivated by money or power alone. She had been handed a sacred trust by the sister with whom she had shared a lifetime of rivalry, understanding, and ultimately, a complex, unshakable love. Monica's words in the will, the sacred duty of finding her niece, were not legal jargon to Tracy, they were a plea from beyond the grave. She became a woman possessed. Locked away in Monica's private study, a room she had rarely been invited into during her sister's life, she began her investigation. It was a baptism by fire into Monica's most intimate secrets. She found old diaries from Monica's early years, before she married Alan. She read of a bright, ambitious young woman, pressured by her parents, Lila and Edward, to make a suitable match. And she found references to a summer spent abroad, a sickness that kept her secluded at a family-owned cottage in upstate New York, and a profound, lingering sadness that was carefully concealed upon her return. The pieces began to fit together. A pregnancy, hidden away to avoid scandal. A child, a daughter, given up for adoption under the stern, unyielding directive of Edward Quartermain. Monica had complied, burying the trauma deep, building her life with Alan, and never speaking a word of it. But the ghost of that lost daughter had never left her. Tracy's search was meticulous. She hired the best, most discreet private investigators, focusing on private adoption records from that specific time frame and location. She used all her considerable cunning and resources, following trails that had grown cold decades ago. Her encouraging words to the family were a masterclass in misdirection. "We must honor Monica's wishes," she would say at tense family meetings, her tone dripping with feigned solemnity. This is what she wanted. "We are Quartermains. We stand by family." In reality, she was playing a deep game, ensuring no one else got a head start on finding the heir, whose identity was now the most valuable currency in Port Charles. The breakthrough came not from a PI, but from a forgotten photograph. Tucked inside a medical textbook in Monica's old desk was a faded, black and white image of a young, smiling Monica, her face glowing with a happiness Tracy had never seen. She was standing with a handsome young man Tracy didn't recognize, his arm wrapped protectively around her. On the back, in Monica's flowing script, was written, "Greenwich, summer of '65. With Peter. Our secret. Peter." The name was a key. The investigators cross-referenced the name with the location and timeframe. They found a Peter Harrow, a medical student from a good family who had died in a car accident just a year after the photo was taken. The tragedy fit the narrative perfectly. Further digging into sealed adoption records, now accessible through a sympathetic judge and a sizable donation, revealed a baby girl born to M. Quartermain and P. Harrow, placed with a family named Spencer. The name sent a jolt through Tracy. Spencer. It was too common to be certain, but it was a thread. And in Port Charles, the most prominent Spencer family was tied directly to Laura Collins and her son, Lucky. But this child would be older than Lucky. Tracy's mind, a steel trap for social connections, raced. Who else? Then, the final report landed on her desk. The baby girl, named Emily by her adoptive parents, had been raised in upstate New York. Her adoptive parents had passed away years ago. She had no known siblings. And her current whereabouts? The investigator had hit a wall. She seemed to have dropped off the grid in her late 20s. Frustrated, Tracy decided to take a different tack. She began discreetly investigating women in Port Charles around the correct age, looking for anyone with a mysterious past, a lack of known family, or a sudden, unexplained arrival in the city. Her list was short, but one name stood out, a woman whose origins were murky, who had appeared in Port Charles with a hardened past and a determination to reinvent herself. The name was Lydia Williams. Act 2, The Prodigal Daughter. Lydia Williams was an enigma. She had arrived in Port Charles a few years prior, a sleek, sophisticated woman in her late 50s with a sharp business acumen and a past she carefully curated. She presented herself as a freelance corporate consultant, a widow who had traveled the world. She was charming, intelligent, and had slowly begun to ingratiate herself with the city's elite, even doing some minor contract work for ELQ's European divisions. She was a ghost, and she had been floating on the periphery of the Quartermain world all along. Tracy arranged a meeting under the pretense of discussing a potential consulting contract. They met at the Metro Court Bar, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished wood. Tracy studied her, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked for a resemblance, the shape of Monica's eyes, the curve of Edward's jaw. It was faint, but it was there, lurking in the subtle lines of her face. Their conversation was a delicate dance. Tracy probed, asking seemingly innocent questions about her childhood, her family. "Oh, it was very ordinary," Lydia said with a practiced, wistful smile. "Small town. Wonderful parents, both gone now. I was an only child, I'm afraid. It made me quite independent." "I understand you spent some time in Europe?" Tracy pressed. "Yes, after my husband passed. I needed a change. A new scene. One must reinvent oneself sometimes, don't you think, Tracy? The words were a perfect echo of the story she had built. But Tracy, a master manipulator herself, sensed the performance. She decided to take a risk, a Hail Mary pass fueled by instinct. "I've been going through my sister's things," Tracy said casually, watching Lydia's hands as she lifted her wine glass. They were perfectly still. Too still. "Monica. She passed recently. It's been a difficult time. She left behind so many mysteries. One in particular, about a child she was forced to give up." Lydia's mask slipped for a fraction of a second. A flicker of pain, of raw, unvarnished emotion, crossed her features before the placid calm returned. "How tragic for her," she murmured, her voice a little too tight. "Yes," Tracy said softly, leaning forward. "She spent her whole life looking for that daughter. She never gave up. She died with that regret etched on her heart." She saw a sheen of tears glaze Lydia's eyes before she quickly looked away. The connection was made. Tracy didn't need to say more. She ended the meeting shortly after, her mind racing. She had found her. She was sure of it. The next day, Tracy confronted her directly, this time in the privacy of her office at the Quartermain mansion. She laid out her evidence, the photo of Peter Harrow, the adoption records with the name Spencer redacted but the dates matching, the lack of any verifiable history for Lydia before her late 20s. "You are Monica's daughter," Tracy stated, her voice leaving no room for denial. Lydia, or Emily, stood silently for a long moment, the wall she had built around herself visibly crumbling. Finally, she nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "For my entire life, I felt a piece of me was missing," she whispered. "I knew I was adopted. I spent years searching for my birth mother. I found the records a decade ago. I discovered she was Monica Quartermain. I was too afraid to approach her. What would a woman like that want with me? I came to Port Charles just to be near her, to see what my life could have been." Tracy's heart, often considered a shriveled, pragmatic thing, swelled with a profound and unexpected emotion. She had done it. She had fulfilled Monica's wish. She stepped forward, placing a hand on the woman's arm. Her encouraging words were, for once, entirely genuine. "She wanted you," Tracy said, her own voice thick. "She wanted you more than anything in the world. Welcome home, Emily. Welcome to the family." Act 3, The Heir and the Hearth. The DNA test, of course, confirmed it. Emily Quartermain, for she immediately reclaimed her birth name, was indeed Monica's biological daughter. Tracy arranged a small, private gathering at the mansion to introduce her to the immediate family. The atmosphere was a volatile mix of shock, skepticism, and cautious welcome. Emily was overwhelmed, her emotions raw and close to the surface. She spoke of a lonely childhood, of always feeling out of place. She spoke of her search, her fear, and her awe at discovering her mother was the legendary Monica Quartermain. Tracy was her staunchest defender, a surprising pillar of support. "This is my niece," Tracy declared, her tone brooking no argument. "Monica's daughter. Our blood. Any hostility toward her is an insult to Monica's memory and a declaration of war against me." The angry threats began almost immediately, though they were, at first, whispered in corners. Brooke Lynn was openly hostile, seeing her own influence and inheritance vanishing. "You can't expect us to just welcome a stranger who shows up out of nowhere and takes everything," Brooke Lynn snapped at a tense family dinner. "She is not a stranger," Tracy fired back, her eyes blazing. "She is the daughter my sister was robbed of the chance to raise. This is her birthright. And if you, or anyone else, tries to challenge this, you will find that my loyalty to my sister's last wish is absolute. I will bury you in legal motions until you haven't a dime left for legal fees. Is that understood?" The battle lines were drawn. Tracy, once the perceived outsider, had become the fierce guardian of the new heir. She guided Emily through the labyrinth of Quartermain politics, teaching her about ELQ, about the family's allies and enemies. She shared stories of Monica, of Edward and Lila, giving Emily the history she had been denied. It was a new baptism, this time into the turbulent waters of her birthright. Emily, for her part, was not the meek inheritor many expected. Having spent a lifetime building a successful, independent life as Lydia, she possessed a sharp mind and a quiet strength. She was eager to learn, to connect, and to honor the mother she never knew. She formed a tentative bond with Michael and Drew, finding common ground in their shared, albeit different, connections to Alan and Jason. But the true test came when the legality of the will was formally challenged by a coalition of distant Quartermaine cousins, backed by a resentful Brooke Lynn. The angry threats were now legal documents, alleging undue influence and questioning Emily's legitimacy. In the courtroom, as the family's lawyers prepared for a vicious fight, Emily took the stand. She spoke not of the money, not of the power, but of the photo TRACY had found. She kept it, Emily said, her voice clear and steady, though her hands trembled. For over 50 years, she kept a photo of herself with my father, a man she loved and lost. She wrote our secret on the back. That doesn't sound like a woman who forgot. It sounds like a woman who cherished a memory so deeply, she could only look at it in private. I don't want to take anything from this family. I just want to finally belong to it. Her testimony, raw and honest, broke the tension in the room. It was the truth, and everyone present could feel it. The legal challenge crumbled shortly after. In the weeks that followed, a new dynamic settled over the Quartermaine mansion. Emily moved in, taking over Monica's old suite, which TRACY had insisted upon. The two women, aunt and niece, forged an unbreakable bond, united by their love for the woman they had both lost in different ways. One evening, they stood together in the garden, looking up at the grand, imposing house. "She would be so proud of you," TRACY said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "I hope so," Emily replied. "I just wish I'd had the courage to come to her sooner." "You're here now," TRACY said, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "And this house, this family, it hasn't felt this alive since Lila left us. You brought her spirit back, Emily. You've brought her home." The baptism was complete. The long-lost daughter had been found, the encouraging words of a determined aunt had guided her, and the angry threats of a fractured family had been faced and overcome. The Quartermaine legacy, so often a source of conflict, had found a new, unexpected heart. And in the quiet of the study, the portrait of Monica Quartermaine seemed to smile, her secret finally told, her family finally, truly, whole.